The rain fell in sheets over Oshodi Underbridge, turning the gutters into rushing rivers and the road into a mirror of chaos. Horns blared, Danfers crawled, wipers fought a losing battle, inside a black Bentley Bentayga that inched through the gridlock. Maxwell George stared out the tinted window, his mind still in the boardroom he had just left. Then he saw her. An old woman stood beneath the concrete overhang, soaked to the bone. Her faded brown wrapper clung to her thin frame like wet paper, grey hair plastered against her skull. One hand gripped a crooked walking stick, the other stretched out, trembling, as she begged the passing crowd, "Please, I haven't eaten since yesterday." The voice, frail as it was, struck him like lightning. He knew that voice. Maxwell's heart slammed against his ribs. "Stop the car," he ordered before the driver could ask why. The Bentley hissed to a halt. He stepped out into the downpour without an umbrella. "Madame Amara," his voice cracked like a child's. The woman turned slowly. Her eyes, dulled by hunger and age, squinted through the rain. She was swaying. "Madame Amara, it's me, Maxwell. Maxwell George." The walking stick slipped from her fingers and clattered on the wet concrete. Her knees buckled. Maxwell lunged forward and caught her just before she hit the ground. 20 years vanished in an instant. He was 7 again, standing by the swimming pool while his parents were away. The water had looked so blue, so inviting. He remembered leaning over the edge, slipping, the shock of cold as the pool swallowed him whole. He had thrashed, screamed bubbles, sunk like a stone. Then strong arms around him, pulling him up, a woman's voice shouting his name through the water. Madame Amara, his nanny, had dived in, fully dressed, and dragged him to safety. She had driven him to the hospital herself, soaked and shaking, refusing to let him go. His parents had thanked her, then blamed her, careless, irresponsible. A week later she was gone, dismissed without ceremony. By the time Maxwell returned from boarding school abroad, no one could tell him where she went. He had never forgotten the woman who gave him back his life. Now he held her in the rain, 20 years later, while Lagos roared around them. "Sir, do I know you?" she whispered, voice barely audible above the storm. "You saved me," he said, tears mixing with rain on his face. "You saved my life." Recognition flickered in her cloudy eyes. "Maxwell." Her lips trembled. "My small Maxwell. You are big now." He took off his suit jacket and wrapped it around her shivering shoulders. "You will never beg again. I swear it." He carried her to the Bentley. The driver's eyes widened, but he opened the door without a word. "Leather seats be damned. Hospital. Now," Maxwell ordered. As the car sped away, Madame Amara clutched his hand like a child. "My sons, Jerry and Jacob." Her voice broke. "They died. People said I was cursed. I lost everything. You're safe now," he kept repeating, turning the heater to full blast. "You're safe." At the private hospital, Dr. Hassan was already waiting. Nurses whisked her away, warm blankets, 4 drips, hot glucose. Maxwell stood outside the emergency room like a man awaiting judgment. When the doctor finally emerged, his face was grave. "She's stable, but barely. Severe malnutrition, pneumonia starting, heart under strain. Another few hours in that rain, and we would have lost her." "Do everything," Maxwell said. "Anything she needs. Money is not the issue." Dr. Hassan placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sometimes, Maxwell, it's not about money. It's about love. Give her that." That night, Maxwell called his wife. "Juliana, I found her. The woman who saved me when I was a boy. I found Madame Amara under a shoddy bridge, begging." There was a long silence on the line, then Juliana's soft voice, "Bring her home." 3 days later, after fluids and warmth and care had brought color back to her cheeks, Maxwell brought Madame Amara to the house in Ikoyi. The gates swung open. Security saluted. Juliana waited at the entrance with their 6-year-old daughter, Amara. Madame Amara stepped out of the car leaning on Maxwell's arm and her old walking stick. Dressed now in a new wrapper and headscarf, she stared up at the white mansion, the fountains, the manicured gardens, as if she had walked into heaven by mistake. This is your house," she whispered. "No," Maxwell said gently. "This is your house now." Amara, clutching her teddy bear, peeked from behind her mother's legs. Maxwell knelt and beckoned her forward. "Amara, come say hello to the woman who saved Daddy's life when he was little, just like you." The little girl studied the old woman for a long moment, then stepped forward and smiled. "Hello, Grandma." The word broke something open in Madame Amara. She pressed a trembling hand to her chest, tears spilling over. "Grandma," she repeated, tasting the sweetness of it. From that day, the mansion changed. Madame Amara was given the sunniest room overlooking the garden. Nurses visited daily. Plates of pepper soup, pounded yam, and fried fish appeared like clockwork. At first she ate in tiny bird-like bites, afraid the food would vanish. Then her appetite returned, and so did her laughter. Every afternoon she sat beneath the mango tree with Amara on her lap, telling Anansi stories and tales of clever tortoises. Amara begged for one more, always one more. Juliana would watch from the balcony, hand over her heart, eyes shining. Maxwell watched too, and something he had carried for 20 years finally settled into peace. He thought the story would end there, a perfect circle closed. But Bodies remember every year of hardship. One morning Madame Amara dropped her teacup. Porcelain shattered across the marble. Her hands shook too hard to hold it. Then came the fainting spells, the breathless nights. Dr. Hassan was summoned again. In the quiet of her bedroom, with rain tapping the window like it had the first day they met, the doctor delivered the truth. Her heart is tired, Maxwell. The malnutrition, the grief, the cold, it all left scars. You've given her the best months of her life, but months, maybe a year if we're very lucky. Maxwell refused to accept it. Specialists were flown in. Medications arrived from abroad. He sat by her bed every night, holding the same hand that once pulled him from the bottom of a pool. One evening, as thunder rolled in again, Madame Amara asked to be taken to the garden. Maxwell carried her downstairs and settled her on the bench beneath the mango tree. Amara was already asleep. They sat in silence watching the storm approach. "Don't be sad, my son," she said at last. "You found me. You brought me home. You gave me a daughter and a granddaughter. You let me die as a mother, not a beggar under a bridge. That is more than I ever prayed for. I want more time," he whispered. She smiled, the same gentle smile from 20 years ago when she had laid a dripping 7-year-old boy on the poolside tiles and breathed life back into him. "Time belongs to God. Love belongs to us. You have given me so much love. Let that be enough." 3 weeks later, the rain came again. Maxwell woke to Amara's panicked cry, "Daddy, Grandma won't wake up." He ran. Juliana was already there, phone to her ear calling the ambulance. Madame Amara lay peaceful, breathing shallow, skin cool. They rushed her to the hospital one final time. Machines beeped. Doctors fought. Maxwell stood at the foot of the bed begging the same way she once had. Only this time he begged fate, begged God, begged the universe. Dr. Hassan allowed the family in together. Madame Amara's eyes fluttered open. She looked at Juliana, at Amara clutching her teddy bear, at Maxwell holding her hand as if he could anchor her to the world by sheer will. "My children," she whispered, "thank you for letting an old woman be a mother again." Amara crawled onto the bed. "Grandma, you promised to carry my baby one day." Madame Amara touched the child's cheek with fingers that barely had strength left. "I will carry all your babies. From heaven, I promise." Then she looked at Maxwell. "Live well, my son. Love them fiercely. That is how you repay me." Her grip loosened. The monitor sang its long, unbroken note. At 4:12 a.m., Madame Amara slipped away as gently as rainfall. 2 days later, beneath a white canopy in the cemetery, the choir sang it as well. The coffin was lowered. Amara sobbed into her father's arms. Maxwell scattered the first handful of earth. "Sleep well, Mama," he said, voice raw. "You saved me twice, once from water, once from a life without knowing how to love. I will never forget." In the weeks that followed, the mansion was quieter, but every evening at sunset, Maxwell, Juliana, and Amara went to the garden and sat beneath the mango tree. Amara brought the teddy bear Madame Amara had loved. They told stories, the same ones she used to tell, passing them on like precious heirlooms. And sometimes, when the wind moved through the leaves just right, they almost heard her soft laughter. The woman who once begged under a shoddy bridge had become the heart of a family, proof that one act of kindness, given or received, can ripple through generations. Her name was never forgotten again. Years passed. The mango tree in the garden grew taller, its branches heavy with fruit every season. Amara grew with it. The little girl who once cried at a graveside became a tall, bright teenager with her grandmother's gentle smile and her father's stubborn chin. Maxwell never let the story die. Every Christmas, the family opened their gates to widows and orphans from Oshodi, Ajegunle, and Muktoko. Long tables stretched across the lawn, pepper soup steamed, jollof rice piled high. Children who had never seen the inside of a mansion ran laughing between the fountains, while their mothers ate second and third helpings without shame. At the head of the table sat an empty chair with a single red rose and a framed photograph. Madame Amara, in her last good month, wearing the blue wrapper Juliana had bought her, smiling like she had won the world. Before anyone touched food, Maxwell stood and told the story again, how a 7-year-old boy fell into a pool, how a nanny jumped without thinking, how 20 years later that same boy found her begging in the rain, how she became grandmother to his daughter and mother to his soul. Some guests had heard it 10 times already. They still cried. Amara, now 16, added her own part every year. When I was 6, she would say, voice steady, "Grandma taught me that love is not something you have, it is something you do." She had nothing, yet she gave everything. So every year we do the same. Then she would walk to the empty chair, kiss the photograph, and place a plate of food in front of it, the way Madame Amara used to set a small portion aside for ancestors. In 2038, Amara gained admission to study medicine at the University of Lagos. On the morning she received her letter, she went alone to the cemetery. The headstone was simple. Madame Amara Obiaguni Amaka. She pulled a boy from the water and taught a nation how to love. 19582031. Amara laid fresh mangoes from the garden tree at the base of the stone. "I'm going to be a doctor, Grandma," she whispered. "I'm going to work in the villages where people still beg under bridges. And every child I save, I'll tell them your name." She pressed her palm to the warm marble, the way Madame Amaka used to press her palm to a frightened boy, a sweat cheek, beside a swimming pool long ago. That same year, Maxwell built the Madame Amaka Foundation. Clinics opened in Oshodi, Ajegunle, and 3 other slums. Mobile health vans carried her photograph on the side. Every van had a small, empty chair bolted inside with a red rose painted on it, so no patient ever felt alone. Doctors and nurses were required to read her story on their first day. Many of them wept. In 2045, Amara, now Dr. Amara George, stood in the new pediatric ward of the Madame Amaka Memorial Hospital in Oshodi, the very place where her grandmother once stood soaked and hungry. She was cutting the ribbon beside her grey-haired father. A journalist asked Maxwell, "Sir, you are one of the richest men in Africa. You could have named this hospital after yourself. Why her?" Maxwell looked at the portrait hanging above the entrance, Madame Amaka smiling in her blue wrapper. "Because," he said simply, "I am only alive to build it because she existed. My name belongs to oil. Her name belongs to mercy." Amara stepped forward, eyes shining. "And because," she added, "every time we save a child here, Grandma gets to pull another little boy or girl from the water." The crowd applauded. Cameras flashed. But father and daughter only looked at each other, and in that moment they both felt it, the gentle pressure of an old woman's hand on their shoulders, the same hand that once refused to let a drowning boy go. The rain that day never came. The sun blazed bright over Lagos, as if heaven itself was smiling, and under the mango tree back home, a soft breeze moved through the leaves, carrying the faintest sound, an old woman's laughter, warm and everlasting. The circle was complete. The love continued. And Madame Amaka, who once had nothing, now lived in every heartbeat the foundation saved, in every story told at Christmas, in every doctor who chose kindness because a little girl once called a beggar grandma. Death had taken her body. Amara, now 31, stood on the roof of the Madame Amaka Children's Hospital in Oshodi at sunset. The city had changed. Flyovers snaked higher, electric danfers hummed below, solar panels glinted on every roof. Yet some things stayed stubbornly the same. Children still got sick. Mothers still begged for school fees. Grandmothers still carried the weight of the world on tired shoulders. She was no longer the little girl clutching a teddy bear. She wore a white coat, now a stethoscope around her neck, and the quiet authority of someone who had delivered babies in village clinics at 3 a.m., and held dying children while whispering the same stories her grandmother once told her. Tonight, the pediatric ward was full. A premature baby fought in the incubator named after her grandmother. A 7-year-old boy with sickle cell crisis slept after his 3rd transfusion. A teenage mother, barely 16, rocked her newborn and cried because she had no milk, no money, and no one. Amara did what she always did when her own strength felt thin. She went to the small chapel on the top floor, really just a quiet room with a single wooden chair, a red rose in a vase, and Madame Amaka's photograph on the wall. She sat in the empty chair and spoke the way she had since she was 6. "Grandma, I'm tired tonight. The baby is 850 grams. The boy asked me if he will die before Christmas. The girl downstairs is exactly the age I was when you came home with Daddy. Show me what to do." Silence answered, the kind of silence that is not empty but full. Then the door opened. A nurse peeked in. "Dr. Amara, the premature baby's mother, is asking for you. She says she has no transport fare home when the baby is discharged. She's sitting under the tree outside. She won't leave." Amara closed her eyes for a second, pressed her palm to the photograph the way she did at the cemetery, and stood. Outside, under the young neem tree the hospital had planted the year it opened, sat a woman no older than 25, soaked from an unexpected evening shower, wrapper clinging to her legs, a small bundle of belongings at her feet. She looked up when Amara approached, eyes red from crying. "I'm sorry, Madam Doctor," she whispered. I have nowhere to go tonight." Amara's breath caught. The rain, the clinging wrapper, the whispered apology. For one impossible heartbeat, the years folded in on themselves, and she was 6 again, watching her father lift a trembling old woman into a black Bentley. She knelt in the mud, not caring about the white coat. "What is your name?" she asked softly. "Comfort, Comfort," Amara repeated, tasting the weight of it. "Come with me." She led the young mother inside, past the nurses who knew better than to ask questions when Dr. Amara had that look on her face. She took Comfort and the sleeping newborn to the staff quarters, found a clean room, ordered hot tea and pounded yam from the hospital kitchen, and sat with her until the shaking stopped. Later, when Comfort finally slept, Amara stood in the corridor and dialed an old number she still knew by heart. "Daddy," she said when Maxwell answered, voice thick, "bring the car, the big one, and tell Mummy to prepare the blue room." There was a pause, and then Maxwell's voice, older now but still strong. "Another one?" "Yes," Amara whispered. "Grandma sent another one." Half an hour later, the gates of the old Ikoyi mansion opened again, just as they had 36 years earlier. Maxwell, hair fully grey but shoulders straight, stepped out of the car first. Juliana, elegant as ever, carried warm blankets. Amara walked beside Comfort, supporting her the way her father once supported Madame Amaka. When they crossed the threshold, Juliana did exactly what Maxwell had done all those decades ago. She wrapped her arms around the soaked young woman and said, "This is your house now. You are safe." Comfort broke down in sobs that sounded like relief and terror and gratitude all at once. Upstairs, in what had once been Madame Amaka's room, kept exactly as it was, with the same garden view, the same soft yellow curtains, they settled, mother and child. Amara tucked the baby into the old wooden crib that had once held her own dolls, the one her grandmother used to rock while singing Igbo lullabies. Maxwell stood in the doorway watching, eyes shining. "History doesn't repeat itself," he said quietly. "It rhymes." Amara looked at him and smiled through tears. "No, Daddy, it continues. Grandma's work isn't finished. It just changed hands." That night, long after Comfort and her baby slept, Amara went to the mango tree. The same tree, older now, thicker, roots cracking the patio stones with gentle insistence. She placed her palm against the bark and whispered the words she had carried since childhood. "Thank you for using us, Grandma. We're still pulling them from the water, one at a time, just like you taught us." High above, a breeze moved through the leaves, and for a moment the laughter that drifted down sounded exactly like an old woman who had once had nothing, and who, through one act of reckless love, now had everything. The circle was not closed. It had become a spiral, rising higher with every life touched, every child saved, every soaked and trembling stranger welcomed home. And somewhere, in a place beyond rain and hunger and graves, Madame Amaka smiled the widest smile heaven had ever seen, because her small Maxwell and her beloved Amara had understood the only lesson that ever mattered. Love is not a debt you repay.